being here tonight. Any first-timers to Pearls of Wisdom? Excellent, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Bonnie Waddy, and I'm standing in for Jill Maxted this evening. I am a fellow board member of the YWCA with Annie Groth and several others here, as well as a planning strategy manager for Gannett. I've known Annie for over 3 years, and she's done a wonderful job pretending to be a dear friend and then promptly pushing me out of my comfort zone. But in all honesty, I know we can all agree those are the friends you cherish the most. And that's one of the ways to recognize your abilities and potential. And I'm incredibly grateful to be here this evening, standing in front of you all, paralyzed with fear. I also thought that little side story was fitting for kicking off this Pearls of Wisdom event because we're all grateful to Annie for shedding light on difficult and challenging topics, for helping us build awareness to where we can make a difference, take control, and impact others through our knowledge and commitment to being our best self. Annie has a few words on this evening's topic.
Good evening. Thank you everybody for being here, and for those of you whom I have not met, my name is Annie Groth, and we've been doing this since 2008. I wanted to let you know that the impetus for this evening was a conversation that I was having with the Chief Nursing Officer of Aetna nationally for Medicaid. And as you know, healthcare has been in the news in so many different ways, and I know that it's important to me that we have the conversation and we take the politics out of it. And so what I asked from Diane was for her to tell me what it meant and what it means from her perspective of why we should all care about this. Because I know that when I see the scenes on television of people being taken out of rooms in their wheelchairs or this, that, and the other, it's easy to classify them as the other. And so I just want to give you what Diane wrote for me. She said, I've been hesitant to stand before a crowd of people and proclaim my expertise in Medicaid. The fact simply remains that I have lived experience and a view of the world predicated from my own personal biases and how I experience the world. I would therefore not classify myself as an expert, denoting knowledge in which some way is predictive, but rather someone who has observations about our society and its ongoing struggle with economics of the disenfranchised. The issue at hand, which seems most relevant to me, is our classification of us and them. The health and life choices that the colleagues who cannot understand why they just can't eat better, lose weight, drink less, choose not to do drugs, etc. The reality, of course, is that there are just as many people on this side making the same poor health choices. But we find that palpable because it's not immediately clear in the political debate that poor health choices cost us all, no matter what side of the fence you happen to be stationed on. Susan Sontag, in her book, speaks of illness as a metaphor and stated that illness is the night side of life. We all have dual citizenship, one in health and one in illness. In our country, when you cross over the threshold of illness, you can linger there in some relative comfort if you are stationed correctly. But once you lose the ability to work and spend your life savings on escalating medical costs, you become one of them, and along with the new citizenship, you now have judgments from others that somehow you are the cause of your own fate, and now we have to pay for you. What if we judged each person without regard to social, economic, racial, or geographical bias? What if each person came before us masked and we had to decide what we would pay for in reference to their health care and their life? How would those political decisions be made then? What if they were us and we were them? Categories create stereotypes and allow us to classify people as having lower status and therefore less deserving. Imagine if we made the same decisions about educating our children. Oh, we do. Imagine a country where we value the health of everyone and create a health budget to focus on health instead of making money on illness. Imagine how more productive our companies would be. Imagine the disenfranchised, enfranchised, and working next to you, creating a future together. The politics about Medicaid isn't about health. It is rooted in our need to segregate ourselves from those in the hopes that we amass enough cash to never be one of them. As Susan Sontag reminds us, we all have dual citizenship, and from my perspective, we are one catastrophic illness from being one of them. So the funding isn't about Medicaid. The funding Medicaid isn't about them, it is about all of us. And yes, and I think that this is a conversation that we owe it to our neighbors, no matter what station they are, to our friends, to our family, to really be involved in this conversation, and not from a political, but you all know me, but from our heart, because that's where the conversation belongs. Thank you.
Before I introduce the first speaker, I would like to give the floor to Paula Collison to introduce you to the Arizona Women's Partnership.
I speak pretty loudly. Hi, thank you, Annie, and thank you for the nice introduction. My name is Paula Cullison. I've been in the Valley since 1974. It's unbelievable, but I've been here that long. Can you hear me better? Okay, cool. 15 years ago, I'll be really brief, I started the Arizona Women's Partnership as a way to give out small grants to charities that have operating budgets of under $350,000 that help women and children. To date, we've given out over 100 grants. Many of the grant recipients are multiple year recipients. They handle domestic violence, child abuse, ESL programs. We have leadership development on the Navajo Reservation, preschool reading programs, ESL programs for adults as well. In South Phoenix, we have a counseling service in Kingman that we give funds to. It depends on who applies. We have a review process every year. The possibility for someone being a recipient is very great because we pre-qualify them. If their operating budget is under $350,000, if they're in good financial standing, if they're not a religious organization and they're not political, that's partisan because everything's political, then they're going to get something from us. And we encourage you to find nonprofits that you're working with, know about, to apply for the grants. The grant application is one page. It's very simple. And we'll review them in April, and then the checks are cut in May. So appreciate that. We had several fundraisers focusing on women. Some of you attended, Wine, Women, and Jazz, and Getting Our Just Desserts. So that's how we have raised the money. But basically, the money comes from grassroots givers, women mostly. Small donations add up. It's like Emily's List. You've heard that. You know, early money rises like yeast. And so that's how we operate. So if you didn't get a brochure, please have a look. They're up here. Thank you.
In 2003, Diane began her career in the home health field. When Diane's mother retired and needed a trusted resource for choosing the correct Medicare plan, Diane volunteered to help her mother navigate the oftentimes confusing and complicated Medicare enrollment process. Diane spent several weeks researching many Medicare plans, all with different deductibles, co-pays, drug plans, and finally found a policy that fit her mother's needs. After helping her mother through the various Medicare options and the sometimes confusing terms and language, Diane saw a need for a service to help other seniors enroll into Medicare, and so she founded American Seniors Advisors, LLC. Diane is passionate about educating seniors on their rights, options, and entitlements in Medicare. She clearly understands she must take the time to investigate and understand the client's needs, health condition, and financial ability in order to provide the best Medicare plan for the client. Diane moved to Arcadia in 1993, where she raised her two daughters. The oldest daughter, a University of Arizona graduate, now lives and works in Austin. The younger daughter, an NYU graduate, is living and working in LA. Formerly, Diane was a running coach with Phoenix Fit. She enjoyed training runners to run their first marathon. Diane ran a total of 4 marathons, 2 half marathons, and 1 triathlon relay. Currently, she practices Bikram yoga, hiking, and occasional visits to the gym. She enjoys cooking at home and experimenting with various ethnic foods. She and her husband have been fortunate to travel many places in the world and enjoy the various cultures and food. Please help me welcome Diane Poitras.
Good evening, ladies. I want to apologize, there was a PowerPoint slide, but we're going to do it just with the worksheets tonight. So, a little louder. Louder? Yes. Okay, I do have a soft voice, so I will put it up a little higher for you, and just let me know. At any point in time, raise your hand if I'm not talking loud enough, but gradually as I get a little bit more comfortable, I'm very nervous. I realize Annie likes to do this to people. So, as I warm up, not to worry, you'll hear me fine. So, okay, I had these handouts for you. Oh, I'll give you this one.
Oh, no, I'll do it.
Oh, no, I have more for you. Anybody else not get it? One more.
And then one for me. We'll let you have one.
Okay. So you ready? Because this is going to be confusing. Okay. This is all for everybody who's basically when you're turning 65 years old, you want to start talking to somebody at 64. It's going to be a little bit of a planning process. Finding out who your doctors are, what your hospital is going to be, what area you want to be in, if you plan to travel. I mean, there's lots of questions I ask in the very beginning, so I get to understand your lifestyle, who you are, and how you want to live down the road, because there's a couple of choices at the very beginning that you must make. Or you're going to get locked into a certain plan. Because for a supplement, it's called a supplement, you have to qualify with health questions. So it's very important in the very beginning that you know, you kind of have a direction where you want to go. But if you don't, that's when you have an expert on, you ask the questions. So this is the basic of enrollment. It's the overview. It shows you, if you go down close to the very bottom, the initial enrollment period. You have 3 months before your birthday, the month of your birthday, and 3 months after. Okay? Now, if you're going to stay employed and under an employee plan, you want to go to HR and make sure that it's called credible coverage. Because if you have credible coverage, you can hold off signing up for Medicare and save this year it's $134. I don't know what it's going to be down the road, but save it. And just keep on your company plan. Sometimes they tell you have to go down and sign up. Please, talk to somebody. You don't have to. Save it. And make sure you copy down that you have credible coverage. I always say, start a file for me. Go to your HR department, ask them if they're going to allow you to stay on the plan, and if so, if it's credible coverage. And then we do the numbers. If it's less expensive to stay on the work plan, by all means do it. Save yourself. So, there are some times when you are on a plan, and if you move out of the area, this is going to start, I can start seeing your red glaze over here real quick, but there's just so much. If you move out of the area, then you'll have to choose a different doctor or sometimes a different plan, because the HMOs are a region and a network. Does that sound familiar to everybody? Okay, good. Because typically everybody kind of goes, what? So, okay. If you're on a supplement, You can go anywhere, as long as they accept Medicare. You can go to any doctor. Now, Mayo Clinic, if you use Mayo Clinic, they have a surcharge, so it's a 15%, they are allowed to charge 15% over because they won't accept, it's called Medicare assignment, is what the payment is, and they don't accept it, so there are some doctors who do. So there's some plans out there that do pay the Medicare extra 15%. So, any questions on this one? Everybody pretty familiar with the open enrollment? Remember, 64 years old, start talking to somebody, figuring out what you want to do. Because if you do not sign up when you are originally eligible to sign up, you will pay a penalty. And not only for Part B, which will be for a lifetime, for the drug plan Part D, which will be for 4 years. So, it's important. So I'm going to have you turn down to a couple more pages. I want you to turn towards the chart right here. It looks like this. It's about 3 or 4 pages back. Yes, ma'am.
Before you move forward, could I ask you what you were saying about the prescription? What 4 years is that about?
You'll pay the penalty for not signing up when you should have signed up at 65 if you do not have credible coverage. So the key words are credible coverage.
Meaning coverage through your work or another?
Not just through your work, it's whatever a plan that Medicare says is credible coverage. Like VAs use the VA, and that plan is credible coverage. So it just really depends. It has to be considered credible coverage. And once you get, if you choose a Medicare Advantage plan, they typically have a drug plan in it. If you've been under 65 and not covered by medical or a drug plan, they're not going to hold that against you, but it's once you turn 65, it's a whole different ballgame. That's when you need to make sure it is what it is. Okay. So on this page right here, we have what's called Original Medicare, and it shows Part A and Part B. Part A is the hospital coverage. Part B is your doctor coverage. Now there's a $1,316, I call it the entrance fee, every time you go into the hospital and they hold you overnight, and that could happen once every 60 days. And then on Part B, you will always have a $183 deductible you must pay yearly. So the first $183 you pay. Then below that, since Medicare doesn't cover the drug plan, you have to get your own stand-alone drug plan, okay? And from there, typically, if people want to stay on the original Medicare, because I call it, they like to drive their own bus. They want to be in charge of their doctors, their hospitals. They want to go where they want to go, and if they want to go 6 months in Georgia or Florida, they're going, and they don't want anyone to tell them they can't go and see doctors there. So you get a supplement, which fills in those gaps up at the top. Now, if you are going to be, you're really healthy, you only go see your doctors once a year for your physicals, then sometimes some people choose the Medicare Advantage because it's within a region and within an area, within a network. So that's why they do the supplement plans. And there's typically zero premium. You can do a zero premium. In Maricopa County, I know there's zero premiums here. So depending on who your doctor is, what hospital you want to see, that's how you choose what plan. Typically, it's whoever the doctor you love, what plan they're on. That's who you, and then you just sort of deal with the ramifications of being on that plan. Some people love it. Some people don't like the idea of it. So it just really depends. And they also typically have a drug plan included in it. And also they have extra benefits. Some of them have the silver sneakers. You know, they have over-counter drug plans. Some do have over-counter drug plans. And some have concierge doctors in them. So, I mean, there's all different types of plans out there. But once you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, and let's say now you want to travel, and you want to switch to a supplement plan, you now have to qualify with health questions. You have one time, your first time when you're entering Medicare, that they can't ask questions. And that's when you're first turning 65. So, if you are considering the supplement, which will have a premium, and you will probably have one minimum copay, which is the $183 Part B deductible, because Medicare, as I was telling Annie, is changing. They want people to have to pay more deductibles. In the past, there were plans that paid everything. You paid the premium, and you just walked into your doctor and you didn't have to worry about paying anything else. But that's changing because they feel it's been misused, or the money's running out. So, yeah. So now they are wanting more deductibles. So you're going to start seeing things change. I just know in 2020, Plan F, which pays everything once you pay that premium, is going away. Now, if you're in it, it's grandfathered. Just the premiums are going to continue to go up because now you don't have any newbies coming in to help keep the premiums down low. So if you're healthy, you can leave that plan and go to another plan. If not, you're stuck. If that's where you're going to stay. And the premiums are just going to go up because people are aging. And as they get older, that's when they have to pay the premiums. So you're in it, you absorb, and then so something to think about. Okay. So let's go back. I have on here what, oh, I'm sorry.
Might be a stupid question, but why did they change? Is it like a year they change and the insurance companies, is that who's changing them?
Let's hold questions to the end.
Yeah, no, I can answer them in the end.
Sorry.
This tells you what Medicare Part A pays and what they don't pay. It's the second page, page 2. And then the next page tells you what Part B pays. So then we can go through the third page and look at the pie. And that tells you what Medicare Part A pays at 80-20. They pay the 80, you pay the 20. And what Medicare Part B pays at the same rate. And this is where my clients' eyes get about the size of silver dollars and go, oh my God, now I gotta keep a part-time job. So then now we can skip to the next page and go on to, it's called Medicare Supplements and the Medicare Advantage Plan. This tells you what it is. So what is a Medicare Supplement and what is a Medicare Advantage? All right, girls, why are you giggling? Right.
Oh, wait,
So I mean, it just lays it out in plain English. There's no right or wrong, it's just, it is what it is, and you get to decide which way do you want to go. And then the next page is the important premium information. This is just what you're going to pay for Part B regarding to your income. Lovely thing is IRS only submits every 2 years. So you might be retiring this year, but they're going from your income from 2 years ago. So if it's way up there, you're gonna wanna talk to either your accountant or CPA and get a hold of Social Security and make sure they know. There's a form that you can fill out that they know that your income is not that anymore, so you don't have to pay the premiums. 2 years prior. Takes them 2 years to get the information to Social Security. And that also works for the drug plan too. Your drug plan can be more also. And that's about all.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You had mentioned something about the Medicare Advantage plans and how do they make choices. They have what's called a star rating, and thank goodness for that, because now they're starting to listen more to the consumers and add the preventive. I mean, I could never understand why they would rather cut off a foot instead of treat the person before they got to that point in time. But I am actually happy to see that they are starting to do more preventive, and it makes so much more sense. That's what we were talking about before. It just makes so much more sense to be preventive, and you, as a consumer, need to really be aware of that. It's in your hands. Your health is in your hands, not your doctor. You go to him for advice. That's how you have to look at it. You have to drive your bus and decide how healthy you want to be, because last thing you want to be is caught up in the system. Don't want to be there. So preventive and good advice. Okay? Okay, well, thank you, ladies.
Hi, I'm Tina Hahn, and I was given the pleasure to introduce our next speaker. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about why I enjoy talking about her. I'll go ahead and cut right to the chase because we know it's Annie Groth. But, I came to Pearls a couple of years ago and was really fascinated with just everyone, all the ladies, everybody getting together, all the wonderful information. And at that time, I was certainly not in the market to make any changes in my financial situation. I have had an advisor that I worked with for years and years, and it seemed like my portfolio was adequate, and I was fine with it. So, excuse me. So I decided, well, maybe I should just take carve a morning out of my time and go meet with Annie just to see what she has to say. Ladies, if you haven't been to Annie's office, take the time. That's all I can say. You will not regret it. She just enlightened me to so many things. She empowered me, really helped me understand my finances better. She told me I need to work longer than I want to, but that's all right. We have a plan, right, Annie? And it truly is just wonderful working with her. She's been not only a wonderful business partnership, but she's an awesome person and friend. And I just really enjoy coming to this and meeting you ladies and hearing Annie speak too. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Tina. And she has the best little dachshund in the world. Her name is Penny. Again, ladies, thanks so much for being here. I think that one of the most important things that I'd like to talk about tonight is your financial health. You know, we talk a lot about our physical health, our emotional health, and well-being, but when do we talk about our financial health? And that's what I'll share with you this evening. And before I get to that, how many of you know and have been here before, but know that I'm walking the El Camino in Spain? I'm just going to talk a little bit about that before I get started. I'll give you the update. I did my third leg of it this year. I just got back from walking 160 miles. And this year it was in the Burgos region, which is very famous for its wine. And it goes from the Burgos to the Plateau, which is miles and miles and more miles of harvested wheat and sunflowers. Spain is very famous for their sunflower oil, so there are just acres and acres and acres of harvested sunflowers. This particular year, it wasn't the most beautiful part of the Camino. I guess that's next year. The first 2 years that I walked the end, and then I walked the beginning, and now I'm filling in the middle. And the beginning and end were both just spectacular, so I'm really looking forward. Next year is the Leon region. One of the reasons why I walk the El Camino is to stay centered and to really think about my life and to envision what I want my life to look like, not only tomorrow, but for the rest of my life. And I don't know when we have the opportunity to do that on a normal basis because we're so busy. You know, we're busy with what we have to do tomorrow. We're busy with what we have to do tonight. Think about what it took to get here today. My day started at 4:30 a.m. I'm taking a red eye when I leave here tonight to go to, yes, it isn't, oh my goodness. But that's what we do to ourselves. You know, it's like, who's in charge of your schedule? Oh, that's right, it's me. So, but anyway, that's why I walk the Camino, to get centered, to really recognize what's important to me in my life. And I'll just share a couple of quick stories with you, and then I'll talk about financial health. When the particular group that I book with, you get the opportunity to pay for your dinner and your breakfast ahead of time. Well, for those of you who have traveled to Europe, Europeans eat a lot later, both in the morning and at night, than we do. And I generally start walking about 6 a.m., 5:30 or 6 a.m. in the morning, because I want to beat the heat of the day. So I got to this one particular little inn. Oh, it was just spectacular. It had a quilted bedspread, and it was marvelous. And the hostess of the property, I told her I couldn't stay for breakfast, and she asked if I would like a picnic. And I said, sure. I said, I don't eat ham, so whatever you want to fix besides, because ham is big in Spain, whatever you'd like to fix besides that would be great. So the next morning I got up and there was a plastic bag with my picnic, and of course it was a ham and cheese sandwich, an orange, and a bottle of water. So I put it in my backpack and off I went. Well, when you're walking the Camino, just like in life, you know, if we keep stuffing things in our backpack or in our heart, pretty soon we get weighted down, right? And so we all like to lighten the load a little bit. So I thought, I got to the second little village that morning and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to leave it. There will be somebody who will be hungry. So I left it on a fountain. And I went to the next village, and I went to the bathroom, and I came out, and there was a man standing there with the bag. He said, is this yours? He told me it was yours. And I said, well, it was mine, but I left it for someone who's hungry. And he looked at me, and he said, I'm hungry. And I said, well, it must have been meant for you. And so we both said Buen Camino, which means good Camino, and off I went. Well, in about an hour, he caught up with me. His name is Sergio, and he had Italian parents. He grew up in Switzerland, and we walked for about an hour and a half together. He was just a wonderful human being. And in that instant, you know why you're doing it. It's about, there is no other. We're all in it together. And then one other quick story I'll share. It was the day before the last day, and I was in this very small village. The population was about 463. I'm still trying to discern where the other 400 people were. Pretty small. And so it was only a 10-mile walk that day. So I got in really early, and I'm like, gosh, what am I going to do for the rest of the day? And so I laid down on the bed for a little bit, took my shoes off, and thought, I know, in Spain, if you haven't been, I'm fascinated with the doors. So I thought I'll just walk around the little village and I'll go look at the doors. So I walk around, I look at the doors, and as I'm coming around the circle, there's an albergue here, and over to the side, there's a white van with all the Camino markings on it. So I go over there and I'm like, and I see in the window, in both Spanish and English, chiropractic, osteopath, and massage. Wow. So it's about a 20-foot RV, and so I poke my head in, and I'm like, what's the deal? And he said, well, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, I don't think anything. I said, maybe a good massage, what's the deal? And he said, 30 minutes, 25 euros. I'm like, just a minute, I'm gonna go take a shower and I'll be back. So I came back, and he didn't leave the room. You know, most of the time massage therapists leave the room and you know, disrobe, and he didn't leave the room. So I left my shorts on, took my shirt off, and left my sports bra on. So I laid down, and he fiddled around with my sports bra just for a minute, and I said, just a minute, I'll take it off. And so I took the sports bra off, and the minute, this man's name is Paco, the minute that man touched me, I knew I was in the presence of a healer. I've never felt anything like that ever in my life. It was one of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had. He got about 50, and I started to cry. And he got about 15 minutes in, and I'm like, and I raised my head, and I'm like, could we do an hour? And he said, 30 minutes is enough. And Nancy, you'll appreciate this. I got off the table, and it was one of the most remarkable experiences I'd ever had. And I looked at him, and I just said, Paco, that was amazing. And he didn't say this, but he might as well have. And he said, you know, it was like, I know. And he hugged me, and I said, what's your deal? And he said, well, I studied in Germany, or Japan, and I've worked in Germany for years. And I said, well, what are you going to do now? And he said, I think I'll finish my life here. He was Spaniard, early 50s. And I thought, gosh, what a great business model. You got your RV, your office, your 9-month-old long-haired German Shepherd named Nova, and you have no overhead. And I'm like, gosh, what a great business plan. But anyway, that's why I walk the Camino. Those kinds of experiences, you know, that you just can't get them if you don't go out and seek. And you don't have to go to Spain to get them, right? You can get them right here. So let's talk about financial health. When was the last time you had a financial checkup? You know, many of us go on about our business, whether it's in our financial health or our regular health, and we think we're fine. You know, it always amazes me when I have women come into my office, men too, but women. When women come into my office, who's your physician? I don't have one. What? I don't have one, I'm healthy. How do you know? How do you know you're healthy? Did you get a checkup? And people who come in with their financials, and people who don't even open the envelopes, right? Because they're either afraid, or the biggest one I get all the time is, I don't know what it means anyway. You know, I've never understood it, so I just don't look at it, and I just hope for the best. So the thing that I like to tell people is you need to know, and especially women. For many of you who know me and work with me, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about working with women is I always say we're the last to know and we should be the first to know. We should always know what's going on with our finances. One of the things that Diane didn't talk about when she talked about Medicare, Fidelity did a study not too long ago, and they counted from retirement age 65 to death, and they counted death at age 85. Many of us in the room will live much longer than that, especially the youngsters in the room will live much longer than that. But let's just say 65 to 85, your healthcare costs, not including Medicare and long-term care, the average is $240,000.
Oh.
Yes. So when you're thinking about retirement and what you're going to do, and especially with those programs being defunded and the programs going away, and our taxes keep, going up, and this is not about being political, it's about what are you going to do. And so when you look at your finances, are you looking in a holistic manner? Or do you just care about what's going on your stock account, right? Or do you just care about what's happening with the equity of your home? All of those things and your insurances need to be combined in order to look holistically. Our next speaker is Dr. Susan Wilder. Do you imagine that when you go to see Susie and you go in there and say, you know what, Susie, my foot has been hurting. Could you prep her for open heart surgery, please? You'd look at her like she was out of her mind. But many times that's what happens in our financial lives. Financial advisors don't listen to you. They don't take into account what is really right for you. It's kind of like you talk to them and it's like, want, Snoopy. Or when they talk to you, it's wah, Snoopy, and then you hope for the best. So I'm going to challenge each of you when you go to see your financial advisor, and I'd be happy to give you a second opinion, you make sure that you understand what they're talking to you about. Because so many people don't understand the ins and outs of what's happening with their money, and especially to coordinate and integrate. You know, I could go see Susie, and Susie'd say to me, you know what, Annie, it wouldn't hurt if you'd lose, a pound or two. Great, Susie, I'm gonna exercise, but you don't mind if I keep eating sugar, do you? Right? You can't do one without the other. You can, but gosh, what an uphill battle. So there are 3 distinct places that you can place your money: protection, savings, and growth. And it's important to make sure that those 3 components are coordinated and integrated rather than working independently of each other. Gosh, Susie, my foot hurts. Could you help me? Well, Annie, have you had an x-ray? That's what I help people with. I'll give you a financial x-ray and see what's happening with your money. Does that make sense? What would you say is the number one concern that people have about their money? What would you say? Outlive my money. What else? Inflation. Right? What else?
How do I keep it?
How do I keep it? How do I keep what I've worked so hard for? So I talked about this in the last Pearls of Wisdom. One of the things that's really important is how much money should I save? And people get really confused about that. So some financial advisors will tell you 15%. Some will tell you more than that, but I'm going to give you the basics of how much money you should save. The base of it is 15% of your gross income, not your net, your gross. Why 15%? 3% for planned obsolescence. We know our tires are going to wear out, we know we're going to need a new roof, all those kinds of things. Technological change. It's like I said, my computer's about a year old, it's probably obsolete already, right? Pretty soon, technological change, mark my words, we will each have a 3D printer in our home. And whether we do it with our credit card, scan our phone, or a chip in our finger, we will walk over to the corner and print out our own shoes. We will print out whatever it is that we want. Technological change. 3% planned obsolescence, 3% for technological change, 3% for inflation. You know, there are a lot of women in this room that are my age-ish. And I remember when I was a little girl, I'd go down to the grocery store and the little corner store and buy my parents cigarettes. They were 10 cents a pack, right? I don't know what they are today. I think it's about $8 a pack of cigarettes, right? So inflation, you know, we have to watch that. Standard of living, 3% for standard of living. And then lastly, 3% for taxation. Now there's a lot of talk about we're going to get lower taxes in this country. It's going to be made up somewhere, but keep in mind when you have a 401k, an IRA, that you're deferring your taxes because you're going to pay them when you retire in your ordinary income tax rate. Well, people have been told their entire lives that they're going to be in a lower income tax bracket when they retire. My question is why would you want to be, right? You've worked hard your entire life and people say, well, I won't have to pay for my house, I won't need that. Great, you don't want to travel? Don't want to go see grandkids? Oh, and I just told you medical care costs, right? So how will you live on less money? But let's just say for a moment that you could. I want to remind you, in 1961, I was 6 at the time. In 1961, the marginal tax rate in this country, anybody, listen, if no one's heard me say this before, if you have, please be quiet. The marginal tax rate in this country, if anybody gets within 10 points, I'll take you to lunch. You don't get to play. You know better. The marginal tax rate in 1961 was 91%. We've already been there. So it's not news and I'll take you to lunch anyway. It's not new. So when we think about what tax rate we're going to be in when we retire, there are strategies that you can do today to minimize those taxes. Last year, one of my brothers needed a kidney transplant. And so I took a bunch of money out of my retirement savings to help him. And man, was that a big tax bill. It wasn't, oh my gosh. So just make sure that you understand what's going to happen when you retire. And yes, there are strategies to help minimize that before you get there. And we'll have plenty of time for questions during the panel. And with that, I'll give you back to Lonnie, and we'll bring up our next speaker. Thank you so much.
Please help me welcome Dr. Susan Watt.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Annie, for having me back again. And I really don't want to take a lot of time speaking. I want to give a lot of time for questions because, you know, healthcare is a conundrum. It is, as physicians in healthcare, anybody who's running a medical practice, any kind of medical business or hospital, are feeling like birds in a hurricane, you know, have no idea which way the system is going to go. And so I'm a big picture person. I always tease my husband because when we started our practice, I said, you know, we're together 37 years. I said, but we are such polar opposites. I am the forest person and he is the veins on the leaves of the trees. So he's the detail person. But, you know, clearly we have some big time problems in this country. First and foremost is we have a completely unaffordable healthcare system, right? We're spending more than double per capita most other developed countries. But our return on that investment is pitiful in terms of life expectancy. We're like 23rd, I don't even know where we are now. And if we, you know, stop coverage for things like contraception, we're gonna see that go down. We are 28th in healthy life expectancy, so we spend more decades with chronic disease and disability than people in 13 other countries. We have very poor maternal and infant mortality rates relative to the rest of the developed world. And basically, you know, in America, this is a pathetic, you know, as Warren Buffett said, you know, healthcare is the tapeworm on the American economy. We are spending over 17% of the GDP. That means money we're not spending on defense, money we're not spending educating our children, money we're not spending on infrastructure and roads and clean water and pollution controls. We have policies that have allowed something like 80,000 chemicals to be introduced into our food and water supply without any great oversight. So when I test patients for things like phthalates, BPA, PTBE, dioxin, which Parkinson's disease alone is definitively linked to 8 of 16 common pesticides. The Lancet Medical Journal just in December published an article noting that endocrine disruptive chemicals, these are hormonally disruptive chemicals that every plastic water bottle we touch, every receipt we touch, are leaching into our food supply, are now definitively linked to autism, attention deficit disorder, obesity and diabetes, we call it diabesity, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's dementia. So just the IQ loss because of the policy path that we've chosen to take in this country, which is ask for forgiveness, not permission. Let's not, you know, let's just see what happens. And you know, the important thing is there's not one person to blame. Anything out there that's all about blame and shame and criticize, complain, we're not going to solve problems. I've been working on both sides of the aisles for many, many years. And I've given up, honestly, in the last several years because of this this divide that's not allowing collaboration to continue and not allowing civility. But if somebody described our healthcare system as, just imagine that we had a cliff and millions of people were dropping off this cliff and getting disabled and injured and dying. And we have designed an incredibly brilliant rescue system to pick up people at the bottom of this cliff once they're already broken, they're already battered, they're already disabled, and try to make them well. So we excel at one thing in the world in terms of our healthcare system, and that is rescue. We will spend whatever it takes to open a blocked artery, or to treat a cancer, or to house an Alzheimer's patient and put them on expensive drugs that do nothing but slow the sinking of that ship. But we don't invest in prevention, and as you said, prevention, proactive, common sense things that we could do to stave off 60% of chronic disease. Okay? It's not a genetic issue either. People are going out and getting their whole genome sequenced for $28,000. Well, that's about as useful as having the New York City phone book and knowing what 1% of the numbers go to, and then knowing what to do with those. So, but where do we begin? It feels so overwhelming. It feels so overwhelming to hear that you will need $250,000 effectively just to cover our out-of-pocket expenses as we get older. Well, the first place to start, as you so brilliantly alluded to, is right here. When my sister was a credit counselor ages ago, she passed away when at 42 of breast cancer. But she was a credit counselor, worked for Clark Howard, so he's on CNN. I think he's pretty well known, right? Somebody said to her, "You've got to get the government to be more conscientious about money." And Katie's answer was, the government is just enacting the will of the people. If we were each better stewards of our health, of our finances, we would not have nearly the national issues that we're dealing with. America has a big culture problem, and that is, we want our cake and eat it too. We want somebody else to pay for it. We want to cut our taxes, but oh, wait a minute, that's revenue. You can't run a business by doing nothing but cutting revenue. But we also can't have unlimited benefits. You can't, give everybody, you can't sequence everybody's DNA. Imagine if I were to give everybody a credit card and say, this you can take to the grocery store and buy whatever you want at the grocery store. Well, what are you gonna get? Expensive stuff. You're gonna get some filet mignon, maybe, whatever, but you're not gonna be a good consumer, right? And so this is kind of what insurance, this ludicrous way of paying for something, has done to our system. Because the insurance gives people this feeling of, well, it's on my insurance. I had a patient the other day who I argued pretty vehemently with, because as a taxpayer it pissed me off, but he went and got 2 orthopedic opinions on the same day for a problem. And I understand his logic, but my feeling is, you ought to pay for one of those. My tax dollars are happy to pay for one of them, but not for 2. That's crazy. If you want an extra one, hey, pay on your own. I had a patient who had cancer for many years, didn't even treat it because he wasn't on Medicare yet. So a lot of people, this uninsured issue is really, really costly. I've seen third world things in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've seen realtors going without prenatal care. I've seen couples lose their jobs and not able to cover their kids' medications. Well, this gentleman was a banker. Obviously didn't do his financial, we're not good at our own things, right? But he was a banker, didn't have insurance, really wasn't insurable. He had a lot of pre-existing conditions and ended up getting to Medicare, so 5 years he had this cancer. So clearly it wasn't a very lethal prostate cancer, and we tried to help him with some natural strategies, but he was still a smoker and heavy alcoholic too. All he didn't help things. But it's on Medicare. Well, next thing you know, ka-ching, it's like the holy grail. I mean, he got put on a drug that was over $70,000 a year. Well, when I evaluated, so this is, okay, not a very lethal cancer in this particular gentleman, clearly. And then I look at the clinical utility of this drug, and the studies show that the maximal benefit you can expect from this drug is that it will extend life 4 months. Is that a use? 4 months. Now, for that individual, 4 months is a huge thing. But, you know, what do we say as taxpayers about that? Is that a reasonable expenditure of your tax dollars? Well, that's a good question too. And guess what? Well, but it's not the drug company's fault either. You know, they're spending about $1 billion to get a drug to market. There is fault and no fault on every side. So I agree, the drug prices are ridiculously out of line. And oh, by the way, the oncologist gets a big chunk of that as well. And there's clinical guidelines that he's following. So when I called him and said, what the heck? You know, there are a lot less expensive medications that could have been utilized. He said, well, the clinical guidelines, which, oh, by the way, 7 out of the 8 people on that clinical guideline had financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry. So we have a huge medical industrial complex, and that's hospitals, that's pharmaceuticals, that's physicians, that's, you know, that are very much enmeshed in wanting to keep the status quo. So you have to be your own advocate or have a healthcare provider working with you who is a solid advocate. I'm trying to think of some of the other big issues. Let me talk a little bit about the Affordable Care Act. Its intent was not to fix healthcare. The intent of the Affordable Care Act was really 3 things. One was to try to insure more Americans, okay? But again, that's getting more Americans into a system that's broken. Not a great system, but did get them insured, and it would accomplish that fairly well. 2, it was trying to reel in some of the worst practices of the insurance industry, things like where I'd see people diagnosed with breast cancer, and oh, by the way, you didn't mention that you'd had fibrocystic changes on your mammogram 6 years ago, and that is a pre-existing condition, you are not covered. Okay, that went away with the Affordable Care. I had a friend who had a bladder, what did she have? A bladder polyp once. She was uninsurable at any price because of a bladder, it was a benign issue. Migraine headache, you couldn't buy insurance. It was crazy. So pre-existing conditions went away. It also reeled in the amount the insurers can profit out of every dollar that's spent in premium. So they can only profit 20%. They can still pay themselves $1 bazillion, but that profit cap did hold healthcare costs a little bit. And the other goal was to get people engaging in preventive care. So preventive care, things were covered. We got kids covered to age 26. We got evidence-proven preventive care was covered at 100%. And we covered contraception, which was a big challenging conundrum, but lowered our teen and our unintended pregnancy rate to the lowest rates ever. Which is phenomenal because every unintended kid is a potential foster care crisis, a potential mental health crisis, a potential criminal issue. So a lot of long-term downsides to that. Unfortunately, anything you do in healthcare that you pull one thread and there's about 1,000 others. And what people don't like about the Affordable Care Act is the pay-fors. Well, you can't have the gimmies without the pay-fors, right? But we don't get that in this country. We really just don't get that. So they taxed tanning beds, cancer factories. Great. Well, that got axed way early on. They taxed medical devices. That's a little bit more challenging. They taxed something called Cadillac plans, these very, very high-end expensive plans that are like that unlimited credit card that when we give people unlimited credit cards, prices go up because they can, because there's no free market reason for them to be controlled. Well, all of those things are being taken apart, and so then we have all the gimmies without the pay-fors, and that's not a viable system. The hope of the Affordable Care Act, too, was that creating this marketplace and putting some a mandate on purchasing insurance would get younger, healthier people into the marketplace and overall offset the cost for those people who are older. So people pre-Medicare who were in the system had a great deal, but it was pretty expensive for the younger people coming in and not really worth the offset, the tax penalty. So people would just pay the tax penalty. The other thing that the Affordable Care Act probably went a little bit overboard is saying, you know what, insurers have to offer at least a minimal basket of services. And that includes mental health care. That includes prenatal care. That includes, which was Bob Senator Kyle's famous line of, well, I'm never gonna need prenatal care, so why should I pay for it? And I don't have a freaking prostate, and I don't, why should I? I mean, seriously. But, just kind of really tried to go very broad brush, but it made the coverage of just adding mental health care makes it very costly. But clearly, we have 25% of our kids and our young patients are not that healthy. 25% of teens and young adults in college have a functionally limiting mental illness. And largely, that is, again, because of our diets, because of our technology, because of our lifestyles, because we're as I put it in my little book, one of my daughters when she was little said, once at first you don't exceed, try again. That is so America, right? We overindulge in food, and we overimbibe alcohol, and we are over-doctored and over-medicated, and we're underwhelmed. So I really want to kind of leave it there and maybe get the panel involved so we can answer some questions, because I think that's the most important thing. And we could talk a little bit about what they're thinking about doing, but I have no idea right now where things are going. So my main takeaway message, as yours was is take care of you. And that means sleep, that means unplug from your media, that means breathe. I have little bookmarks I'll give you each, and that have my vitality compass. That means eat wholesome, organic fruits and vegetables, and exercise, and just common sense things. And 60% of chronic disease in this country. I just had a 78-year-old reverse her diabetes. Diabetes is not a permanent condition. It is a never condition. No patient should get to type 2 diabetes. And we were diagnosing kids because of some of these chemicals in our environment and the crap that they're eating. So let's get that panel together. Did you have anything else to see?
Our first question for Diane. Why do the plans change? Is it yearly? How often? What is it based on?
Well, it is yearly, and it's each company, they tweak their plans as well as they tweak, we call it the formulary, their drug plan. It has to do with trying to save or trying to make their plan more appealing to the consumer. they ultimately want more people joining their plan. I mean, like, there's the 500-pound gorilla of United Health. You know, the advertising is just huge there. Some plans are better for other people, but you don't hear quite so much about them. So it's the plans trying to do what they can to bring in more people, because ultimately they make more money. That's ultimately what it's about. And they go by the STAR plan. So they are trying to do customer service. They are trying to put their sparkle on for everybody to join up, but it ultimately is the more people that come on it, the more money they make. And
Unless you're really expensive.
and so it's just, bottom line, I call it the almighty dollar. That's what they're, I don't know if prevention, I don't know if they're trying to do the preventive, I don't know. You know, ultimately you would think it would make common sense. You have more people on the plan and you're keeping them healthy so you don't have to pay out for health service. So, I mean, it's just, who knows, but it boils down to money.
I have a question as it relates to education based on what Susan J. Komen would put their emblem on as far as products go that are very much not healthy products, but they're promoting their cancer awareness. It feels like a lot of what associations stand for is antiquated information. And how do we, as people who are trying to do the best we can do, get the best information as far as what to eat and what's important? Because I think that there are a lot of influencers who are maybe not leading us in the right direction.
Right, right. I mean, even the American Academy of Family Practice, I think, had some kind of deal with Coca-Cola, which is just unbelievable. But, you know, money is money, and these organizations need money, and they'll sign deals with the devil to get what they need. So where do you get good information? I mean, I look at things like Harvard newsletter, or I'm trying to think of other good resources for the community. Some of my mentors are in functional medicine, and how many of you have ever heard of functional medicine? So more than used to be. When I first started in 14 years ago, there were like 50 people in a room, and half of them were totally flakes. But it is really, Mark Hyman is a great influencer who's in it. He makes money, let me tell you. But functional medicine is a movement trying to understand the root causes of chronic disease and reverse them. So I just had a hospital executive. We reversed, after 40 years, attention deficit disorder, chronic fatigue, insomnia, depression and anxiety, and off of 5 medications in one year by looking at root causes like nutrient deficiencies, the quality of her diet, her complete lack of stress management, her complete addiction to technology and being a workaholic, her and severe sleep apnea that she didn't know she had. She didn't even snore, but just, you know, kind of targeting a bunch of these roots. So I don't look at, you know, diabetes as a, here's your diagnosis and here's your drugs, because that's how we're taught in medical school. I look at diabetes as, ooh, this is a symptom of a whole bunch of different things, including environmental toxins, nutrient deficiencies, sleep apnea, stress, you know, lots of different things. So Mark Hyman to me is an influencer that I would consider following. And just, you know, I think we just everything, we're inundated. You know, I always say the internet is we are overwhelmed with information and starving for knowledge, right? So we just have to have be a skeptic about everything we look at and everything we read. My patients send me things constantly, and we discuss them, and I am their filter. of that information, just much like Annie, it would be for financial, we're all inundated with financial recommendations too, and most of those are biased. So just being, more conscientious consumers, starting to learn about our own health and getting a good proactive, preventive primary care provider who can work, kind of filter that information with you.
Thank you. Annie, should we come into you yearly whether we have changes in our lives or not?
Coming in for an annual review is more than just checking balances. Coming in for an annual review, one of the things that people very seldom consider about their financial well-being is how is your emotional well-being? How is your behavioral well-being? Because our management of our finances is so much more than just dollars and cents. When we were little, our parents would go to the grocery store and they may say, we can't afford that. Maybe you heard that the first time when you were 4 years old. And so you grow up with that blueprint and it stays with you. Rather than, I have a friend, when she was a little girl, she was about 3 years old, she was sitting in her high chair and she held out her glass and said, give me too much. She's very wealthy today. So there are so many things that I like to check in with people, and it's not just about the balance on your stock account, it's not about the balance in your mutual funds, it's not about the equity in your home, it's about the balance in here, because that all matters. And if, again, Pearls of Wisdom was begun because the importance of connecting mind, body, and spirit, because if those things are incongruent, so is everything else we're doing. And it's just nice to come in. And plus, I'd love to see you anyway. So, yes.
Diane, I have United Health, the F plan. I'm grandfathered in. Please explain the G plan.
Okay. It's identical to the F, and you will only have $183 deductible a year. So you'll save on premium amount. I know it was you. You'll save premium as well as still get the same benefits.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Annie, what in your opinion is the single greatest unhealthy move women make around their finances?
I have to repeat that in case you didn't hear it. The question, am I blushing? What's the most unhealthy thing that women do around their money? And the response from the audience was marriage. I'm just not even going to touch that one. The most unhealthy thing that all people do, and women especially do, is we don't pay attention. Somebody else will do it. Somebody knows better than I do. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to look at the envelope. I don't want to think that I'm stupid, that somebody thinks that I don't get it. And I will tell you, I don't care how long it takes until you come in my office and say, oh, I get it. I had a client years and years ago. For the first 3 years, she was a client every year, our annual review. Why are we doing this? And I'd tell her. Second year, why are we doing this? I'd tell her. Third year, oh, I get it. Because a lot of times when you come in to see me, I'm not a traditional financial planner. And it's not about changing the content, it's about changing the context of how you think about things and how you think about money. If money were easy, everybody would be in my profession. It's not. It's not an easy topic, and because we have emotion wrapped around it, we have other people wrapped around it, marriages. We have children who go to expensive colleges, Susie, twins, 2 at a time, lucky you.
Empty nest, empty pocketbook.
Right? So there are many things to consider when we think about our money. And one of the things, pieces of advice that I would give you is, If you have a turnstile about something that you think about all the time, about your money, anything really, get to the root cause of that turnstile. Because then you can stop the insanity in your head. Because many times we go over and over and over, and we always wind up at the same place. But if you can't get to the root cause, or you're ashamed to talk with someone about it, you can't get over it. You can't get past it. You know, I think it was Albert Einstein who said, you know, the same mind who thought of it can't be the same mind that fixes it. I mean, that's not verbatim. But, you know, if you're thinking about something with the same mind, it's impossible to get to a solution, unless you go walk the El Camino.
Susan, if you had to pick an individual health plan right now, what would you look at to make that decision?
Oh my Lord. Honestly, you know, in my mind, insurance should be insurance. And that means it's there for catastrophic, extreme, unusual circumstances. So I would pay the minimum amount I could in premium and have as high of a deductible as I felt I could absorb, and have something that was going to cover me and my family for catastrophic needs. Now, all of us move around, and this is something that the GOP has been trying to solve for a long time, is having insurance that really crosses state lines. I have patients who are back and forth. But the states don't want to do that. States want to regulate it. They want to be in control of cheapo plans that might be sold under their purview. So, but anyway, I have no love lost for the insurance industry. No offense to Annie, I love Annie, but with the medical insurance industry anyway. And I think that the business model is insanity. I think we'd all be better off with a system where our common things, I don't expect my car insurance to pay for the tires I need. I don't expect it to pay for routine maintenance. I think that we'd be much better off with a system where primary care is completely on your own, and you could choose to go to a naturopath, you could choose to go to a concierge physician, you could choose to go to a Quickie Mart, I don't care, but you could go wherever you want, and you just pay your way, and then your insurance just kicks in for those really complex and catastrophic things. The problem is when you use insurance, every place that is on your insurance ramps their prices up to the highest insurers will pay, right? Because they'd be stupid not to as a business. So this is why the cash prices for everything are astronomical. It shouldn't cost a semester in college to go to the ER. It shouldn't cost $40,000 to $50,000 out of pocket for a cancer diagnosis. It is $250,000 in this country if you have a heart attack or a significant motor vehicle accident. In most other countries, it's about 1/10 that. So, I don't know, I think insurance is crazy, personally.
I just want to add a couple things onto that and ask you another question, if you don't mind. I'd like to get your opinion about single payer. And then I will also say, the thing about big pharma, and I don't know if there are any pharmacy people and any love lost with the pharmacy industry. Just being in Spain, I went to the pharmacy, and you don't have to have a prescription. You can just walk in and get whatever you request. And so I had asked a friend I was having trouble sleeping. Can you imagine walking 15 miles a day and having trouble sleeping? So I needed a little something to help me sleep. So I got 25 milligram sleeping aids. And 25 600 milligram Advils, €6. Right? €6. It's craziness. But I'd love to know what you think about single payer.
Ooh, so I am a free market person, and I believe that the most intelligent way to pay for anything is a truly free market. But what most people don't understand is we don't have a free market in healthcare, right? You can't go in and negotiate with a radiologist. You can't, I had to go get my colonoscopy, and oh, by the way, the anesthesia's not covered.
Right.
Well, I'm not doing that without anesthesia, so don't know about you, but I like that propofol. I mean, we know what Michael Jackson liked it, but anyway. And the current healthcare system is a profitized system. So people are worried about socialized medicine, but here you've got a system where every provider, is paid basically the same. So I got paid the same by Blue Cross, by United, by Aetna, by Medicare, as with 20 plus years of experience and 99 percentile on my boards and a very busy practice and high demand, I got paid exactly the same as somebody who passed their boards on their third try and did their medical school in the Caribbean, paid for their degree out of a cereal box. I don't know, but there's no incentive. So, that's not a healthy system either. And I always told people, look, if you want your insurance company to manage your healthcare, it's a little bit like having Bernie Madoff manage your finances. Their incentives are not aligned with yours. However, a single payer system, which eliminates a lot of the complexity and craziness that we currently experience, eliminates a lot of your freedom. We are rugged individualists in this country. People want to do what they want to do. And I just don't see it being realistic. And the price, when you look at the price of the proposals, it's in the trillions of dollars. I don't see how, any way, shape, or form that it would be affordable. So my personal push for 15 years that I was involved in healthcare reform was that we need to have a floor. We need to have a floor of evidence-proven preventive care and catastrophic care. People shouldn't have 60% of bankruptcies occurring because of a single health issue. Families going bankrupt because their kid had cancer. These are hard. I had a close friends of mine, and I took care of him through the end of his life. He had a brain tumor for 13 years. They expended their lifetime cap and went bankrupt. He was a successful developer. She's a physician. Went bankrupt at the age of 53 because of a single health issue. That honestly, we should be able to work around that given what we're spending on healthcare. But we also need to, and I'm going to say the word, ration, because resources are not unlimited, right? We don't have an unlimited credit card. And that means, ration, the root is the root of being rational. We shouldn't be paying $70,000 for a drug that's going to give somebody a marginal potential increase in life expectancy. When my sister was experiencing cancer, she was told she needed a bone marrow transplant. It was very experimental. This is 23 years ago, right before my daughter was born. And insurance would not cover it, and we couldn't afford it. No, none of us in the family. She didn't have it, and she passed away. And I'm not sure that would have saved her. I don't think it would have. And I don't have any hard feelings about the insurance company. That was a logical, rational decision. But we need to invest in what's called comparative effectiveness research to determine, hey, is acupuncture as effective as doing a knee replacement? Is a very cheap over-the-counter supplement like berberine as effective as some of these expensive diabetes medications that are being peddled to every physician out there? The reps were just in the other day, they said, we don't even talk to you, Dr. Wilder, because none of your patients need those meds. And they said, that's exactly right. They should never have to go to that level. And I think the insurance plans should have to invest in some of that. That may have to be legislated. The reason that they don't invest in prevention to a great degree or in that kind of research is because they predict that you're going to be on their plan an average of 4 years or less. So they don't want to help somebody else's plan do better down the line. But if we all thought together and worked together, wow, it would help the whole system. So, sorry, I keep going.
One more question as it relates to mental health care, and maybe Dr. Wilder and Diane can speak to this a little bit. What's your advice for getting mental health care for the uninsured, and sort of where do you see that whole component of insurance evolving?
So mental health care really starts with personal health, I believe. So when I look at the roots of mental health problems, I look at sleep, I look at nutrition, I look at nutrient deficiencies, I look at stress, learning how to manage stress. I mean, just things like the Calm app or Heads app, WhatsApp or Heads Up. These apps that help people meditate and learn mindfulness and those kinds of things are extremely helpful. My daughter, one of my twins, can, tracks her sleep on a Fitbit and can send it to me and tell me. I have patients send those kinds of things to me, and those give you good information. There are also increasingly some telemedicine options for mental health care where you can have, I can't remember the name of one of the websites, but it's just like online psychologists. These aren't psychiatrists or medication. Psychiatrists have become medication pushers, but for just cognitive behavioral therapy, it doesn't have to be expensive. So those kinds of things are worth looking into. Unfortunately, mental health care in the standard medical system is not that effective. It's not that great. I'm not impressed with it. It's throwing a lot of drugs at things that I think we can fix in much less expensive ways. So I say, first and foremost, follow the little bookmark Vitality Compass, because in 26 years of practicing family medicine, it is those simple things that I'm harping on again and again. And I had a patient just like your client who, she's in her 80s, she's like, would you stop harping on the plant-based diet? What the heck are you talking about, the plant-based diet? And I said, look, I said, I can reduce your likelihood of disability by over 50%. I can reduce your all-cause mortality by 47%. Can reduce your risk of cancer, heart disease, osteoarthritis, blah, 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 just by eating a plant-based diet. Or I could throw a ton of medications at you, in which case you're gonna still be disabled and have a ton of medications. So it would be malpractice for me to not be harping on a plant-based diet. She says, okay, I'm going to Sprouts. So.
I want to make sure, did your question get answered? I know you had a question.
Well, when she was talking, before you said that Plan F goes out in 2020, does Plan G go out in 2020? So for $183 a year?
Well, you have a premium, but
Well, no, but
You will have a premium with it, and it's much lower, as well as all you have to do is pay that $183 deductible for Part B. That's it. And it still covers the excess charges, the 15% excess charges. So it's identical. You just have that deductible at the beginning of the year, $183 for Part B.
And then Monique, did your question get answered? Yes? Okay.
Is it true that every 6 months Medicare wants you to come in and have a preventative diagnosis done? Because my doctor's office wants me to come in every 6 months to have a preventative diagnosis done.
You mean like your wellness?
A wellness, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Is that mandatory?
I don't know that for a fact.
It's not mandatory.
That could be your office. It could be your office.
Well, again, people resist this all the time, but there is a once a year Medicare wellness evaluation, which is really just kind of a preventive checklist. It's not involving it cannot involve any physical exam or any other assessment of any other problem. If there are any other chronic issues that are being monitored, if there are certain medications being monitored, we may require that people come in because, blood pressure was a little high, I'm gonna look at that again, or cholesterol and monitoring kidney function, etc. So a lot of times it's the medications and the problems that might be dictating more frequent than once a year. So that's the big thing.
As an interior designer, I'd like to ask you a question. I work a lot in creating healing environments. And I would like to hear your thoughts on how important it is for people to live in their own expression of what a healing environment is.
Right. I don't know if people heard the question, Barbara's question, but it's talking about the importance of living in a healing environment. I just happened to hear a talk about a week ago on, have you ever heard of forest bathing? It's a Japanese Shinrin-Roku. It's forest bathing, being out and exposed to nature is considered and is proven to be incredibly health improving in terms of mental health, in terms of physical health, etc. Well, the study showed just visualizing nature, so you could have it on a screen, you could have it in terms of imagery, you could have natural plants in your home, and just the presence of nature in your environment in any way, shape, or form had equivalent effects on inflammation and inflammatory markers, on blood pressure, on a lot of different health parameters. So yeah, I'm a big believer in a healing office environment. We were very fortunate to work with someone named Jane Malkin many years ago. She's retired, but who taught the course at Harvard on healing medical design, and I just did a brilliant job, and I'm so grateful every day for that. So I think having a healing environment is truly part of your health.
And your office is really, really.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.